Good evening, YouTube. I apologize if I seem a little unprepared for video viewing. I just got finished mowing my lawn. It's kind of late, but it's summertime, so we can do that. What I'd like to do with this video is, and just for the record, I'm not ordinarily a very hostile person towards evolutionists. Relatively speaking, I'm not very hostile at all, but I would like to point out a type of evolutionist who has been getting on my nerves. I started reading his comments earlier today. I have gotten more comments from him since I started. We've been having a bit of a dialogue, and he's not only arrogant, but he's extremely ignorant, and he would like to make me believe that I am wrong when he is clearly at fault. So, I'm going to make two videos. This first one, I'm going to be discussing sickle cell trait, which he brought up on one of my videos called Evolution versus Creationism. So let me just pop in here and I will demonstrate what this started talking about. He says at first, those with the resistance do not have sickle cell anemia, which is the result of inheriting mutation from both parents. They have sickle cell trait. He says that there is difference, that they are different, and it is exactly what evolution theory would be stating. He says that these mutations have been studied and identified, and that they provide resistance, not immunity to malaria. I'm sorry if I'm not looking at the camera. I'm reading this. Please bear with me. And so I decided to kind of tackle what he said, and I said that yes, people are resistant to malaria because of the trait are being selected, like he mentioned, because obviously people who do not have this resistance are more likely to die because of malaria than people who aren't. I'm not arguing that. I'm arguing what happens because of this resistance. I had three main points. The first one is that this sickle cell trait has produced nothing positive. I'm sorry I forgot to mention that. His name is McMonster65. I apologize for not having mentioned positive, but that's what I meant by that. It's produced nothing positive except a resistance to malaria, which is it's not a ridiculously significant resistance. It does help a lot, but it could do very much more for very many other subjects if it were what I would consider a positive mutation, and you should not consider it one, considering negative traits, which I will tackle in a moment. The second thing I mentioned was that sickle cell is present elsewhere in the world without malaria and has no positive effects to those populations, which I said that doesn't truly matter to the subject, but it was supposed to make a point which he did not get. And three, the trait of the cell, the sickle part, is the source of the problem in the first place, and also the reason for the resistance. The difference between it and anemia is minimal. What I meant by that was the difference between it and anemia negatarily, which is, I hope is a word, is very minimal. So he says that I have no idea what I'm talking about. That is produced nothing but a resistance. What do you mean? Here, I'll say it exactly. He quotes me. That has produced nothing except a resistance. What do you mean except? If so, then what's your issue? The mutation confers a habitable advantage, and so those with it live long enough to reproduce. Hence, the mutated gene spreads. He said you hit the nail on the head with point 2. It doesn't really matter. He says the difference between it and anemia is minimal. Very wrong. I will get to that in a second. So he says that it is found. Here's another thing. Point 2 needs some thought. Evolutionary theory is about fitness relative to an environment. I don't really argue with that, but he said that sickle cell trait is found worldwide that would be expected from a random mutation. Yes, I agree with that. In Norway, the fact mutation confers a resistance to malaria is neutral for obvious reasons, hence it occurs at a low rate. Okay. Elsewhere, there is a selective pressure through the mutation, which makes one more fit, hence the huge surge of numbers carrying it 1 in 4 in West Africa. Okay, here is my point. Let me check my time. Okay, I'm doing great on time. My point is, and I did a little bit more research, and this is from John Kark, MD. He's formerly of the Unified Services University of Health Services, Howard University School of Medicine. So this guy's got his credentials, and he wants to talk about sickle cell trait, which is different from sickle cell anemia, and this is what the guy is trying to say has more positive benefits as a mutation than more negative benefits. And I will probably leave a link to this in the side. I will definitely link to this in the side. It says sickle cell trait usually is not regarded as a disease state because it has complications that are either uncommon or mild. Nonetheless, under unusual circumstances, serious morbidity or mortality can result from complications related to polymerization of deoxyhemoglobin S, which basically means that it causes problems. You guys can look more into this. I don't have time to explain it. Such problems include increased urinary tract infection in women, gross hematuria, I can't pronounce this, complications of hyphemia, splenic infraction, and altitude hypoxia or exercise and life-threatening complications of exercise, exertional heat illness, heat stroke or renal failure, idiopathic sudden death, and the pathogenic process that causes hypoxia, acidosis, dehydration, I can't even pronounce this, hypothermia, and elevated, can transform silent sickle cell trait into a syndrome resembling sickle cell disease. So you guys can feel free to read this. His basic point that he's trying to make here is that sickle cell trait looks harmless and it is not ordinarily diagnosed as a disease like sickle cell anemia is. Nonetheless, it still causes significant problems. Sickle cell anemia can cause, on average, a lifespan of 40 to 50 years. It's lethal. It kills you. It prevents malaria. Sickle cell trait, on whole, does not always have all of these negative traits to it, as he discusses throughout this entire page, which is much, much too long for me to tackle. These problems do occur. If you have the sickle cell trait, it's a negative mutation. It causes way more problems than it solves. You don't get malaria, but you get splenic infraction, urinary tract infection, heat stroke, renal failure, idiopathic sudden death. A lot more problems than it solves. I was called ignorant of... Here, I'll go back. Sorry to be blunt, but you've not got the faintest idea what you're talking about. Really. I haven't the faintest idea what I'm talking about. Now, I won't try to impose a tone of voice to this, which is why I don't particularly like text communication, because I can't get a tone of what he's trying to say. A friend of mine, Jake11384EB, who's the person Monster is trying to rebut, was trying to refute things that were left on the video that I decided not to tackle because they really weren't worth my time. And no offense to Sauko, which is who left this. I believe I tackled this in another video, but once again, it's not worth my time in text, and I apologize. Monster tried to demean his intelligence, and was relatively hostile via text, and you guys are welcome to observe that yourself. I tackled it in one text box. It was relatively small by my standards, and he proceeded to attack me like I was a 4-year-old, like I was an infant, and like I had no idea what I was talking about, when, if you actually would read studies done by people with, I'm sorry, but initials after their name, meaning they know what they're talking about, especially someone from the Uniformed Service University of Health Services, Howard University School of Medicine. This gentleman obviously knows what he's talking about more than McMonster does, and I would very much, McMonster, if you're watching these two videos, I'd like a formal apology, or for you to explain why you still think I have no idea what I'm talking about, when obviously you're the one who is at fault. Again, you tried to... You completely dodged, once I rebutted you, you completely dodged the fact that I destroyed your earlier argument, and I mentioned that if the trait helped with multiple viruses as opposed to just malaria, then I would count it as a positive. And you said, what? Do you think I'm trying to pass an audition? No. What I'm saying is that when sickle cell is counted as a positive, all of the negatives are overlooked, which seems very cultish if you ask me. I find that the Evolutionist seems very much like a cult, considering they ignore all the negatives when they spew out a positive. You're doing the same thing. I apologize for my aggravated tone, but you're aggravating me with your text comments. My next video will be tackling, will be attacking the moths that you talked about in your in one of your other comments, and once again I apologize for the aggravated tone of voice, and I will be back shortly. Peace, and God bless to you all.